Greetings, hi, TheWarOwl greets you, and happy controversial major update, folks. I would have made this video yesterday, but it was April 1st, and I feared nobody would take me seriously, like anybody does anyway. Operation Vanguard has finally come to a close about a month after it was originally scheduled to. This might give an indication that our fearless devs are a bit behind schedule, if Valve believed in schedules. This means our beloved season has now been relegated to the dustbin of map history, not finding its way into the reserve group like we all were secretly hoping. Train has seen a few modifications and has been officially introduced into active duty, while Nuke has been benched. Of course, a breadcrumb of hope has been left by Valve, indicating that they're working to give the old gal a much-needed facelift. I criticized the visual appearance of Nuke when it was first released as looking like just a reskin of the source version. Here's hoping it gets goified to beautiful splendor. Though, I don't think Valve is taking my suggested changes very seriously. Expect a reemergence of Nuke at some point. The question is, which map is next on the chopping block? There were quite a number of important gameplay changes in this update, which I believe drastically changed the meta of the game. Let's start with the smokes. There are two aspects to the smoke improvements. One is in terms of the spectator experience, making them more consistent with what the player sees and fixing some of the bugs. The other is actually getting rid of a few pesky issues with gameplay, one of them being the ability to see under smokes in certain positions, which was lovely for all of us, wasn't it? This has been rectified, I believe. I think these are all good steps forward for smokes, so we got a bunch of fixes here. We then move on to tagging. I've spoken about the tagging changes before, back when they were introducing the new algorithms. This time the mechanics are the same, but the values have been modified across the board. As a quick reminder, tagging is when your movement speed is lowered when you're shot. My foes never have to worry about tagging because I always hit them right between the eyes to end them quickly. The humane way to put down a noob. But for the vast majority of people, each weapon has a tagging value, both for how much slower someone shot with it will walk, as well as how much slower someone holding it will walk when shot. Both the attacker's and the target's weapon are taken into account to calculate it. One of the changes causes players to slow down even more when shot multiple times, which essentially buffs high fire rate weapons like submachine guns. Would you like to know more? Valve has a guide you can read. I've linked it in the description of this video. The next change is rather inconsequential. The M4A1S has had its price increased by 100. So a weapon that started out being much cheaper than its counterpart, the M4A4, then the same price, and now more expensive. It's like the devs finally realized the M4A1S is the more preferred weapon. Finally. This brings us to the understanding that the devs use statistical analysis to make their changes. They see people using the M4A1S more than the M4A4. Oh, I guess there's a balance issue. I'm sure it's more complicated than that, and I don't mean to undermine their ability to make these changes. But I've stated it before, and I'll say it again. You can't just base your decisions on the numbers. Making a game isn't a science. Making a game isn't an art either. It's a craft, and it requires both mind and heart. And finally, the changes I'm sure you've all been waiting for. Drumroll, I'm too cheap to get a drumroll sound effect. The Tech 9 Nerf. They've reduced the damage fall-off distance and reduced the magazine capacity. What's interesting about this change is that they didn't actually change any of the mechanics of the weapon. The gun still works the exact same way as before. This will prevent those ridiculous tap headshots across the map that we've seen, so I guess it's a good change in my book, even though I loved doing those, because it doesn't change the personality of the weapon and just prevents it from being used in a cheap fashion, which I loved using it for. I still see the Tech 9 used for effective second round buys, and really, is there anything wrong with that? Without nerfing pistols any further, the way to increase variety in weapon choice would be to buff the cheap submachine guns. Oh, they just did that. The MP9 and the MAC-10 accuracy have been buffed. The superior MP7 has as well, but let's be honest, it's far too expensive to really warrant a purchase when the UMP is good enough. The MAC-10 and the MP9 accuracy buff, as well as the tagging update, encourage a run-and-gun gameplay, which is not a good thing. The MP9 is ridiculously useful now. The spray control is easy, the fire rate is very high, sure to stop your enemy dead in his tracks. I think the idea is to again encourage more SMG use. While it does improve run and gun, it in no way makes that a viable strategy against a skilled player. The next drastic change, which I'm worried will send out shockwaves, is the nerf of the AWP scoped movement. To explain what's going on here, when scoped, you now have a very slow acceleration when running. In fact, when shift walking, you immediately start at your max walk speed, making it faster to start shift walking than running. The optimal scoped movement then with the AWP would be tapping shift to get going. It all feels really awkward. What this accomplishes, though, is prevents a peeking technique where players will scope before they turn a corner. We've seen a high rise in the aggressive peeking AWPing styles in the past half a year or so due to superstars like Kenny S and JW making good use of it. Now it seems to peak effectively, players will have to start quick scoping, meaning scoping after they've already stopped moving and only scoping when they're ready to fire. Keep in mind the tagging also makes it tough for an AWPer to reacquire cover if they miss. If you haven't tried it out yet, it feels off and really hinders an AWPer's performance. It feels like they want to relegate AWPing to just holding angles. With every other weapon, you can quickly strafe back and forth around corners, avoid getting shot, but now with the AWP, it's like trying to tow a U-Haul with a scooter. I feel like this will greatly change the meta of the game and could inspire future changes to the movement values based on the results. Something like this solidifies the need for a public test build, allowing these changes to see scrutiny before going live. Moving on to less important matters, trade-up contracts now work with StatTrak. This makes sense because there's probably an abundance of crappy StatTrak weapons just floating around asking to be melted down due to the millions of cases opened by ever so entertaining streamers and YouTubers. This will drastically affect the market value of expensive weapons. I expect there to be a market crash of sorts as a result of this. If you're a marketeer, if that's even a word, yesterday was the time for action. You're screwed. There's also a new StatTrak swap tool for a cheap price. It's pretty much just exchanging the StatTrak value on two different StatTrak weapons as long as they are the same weapon. So if you get a fancy new AK-47 skin and you want to transfer over from your blue laminate, just swap it over. If I ever want to turn in the AWP formerly known as Choas Breaker, I won't feel like I'm losing all my progress. But what it does do is damage the personal relationship we have with our weapons. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. The StatTrak numbers give it a character, like an odometer on a car. How much action has this skin seen? How many adventures have we shared? For even less important changes, a game option has been added in the team options section that lets you decide whether your lobby is created in private mode or public mode. My question is, does this fix the chicken issue? During the last tournament, someone used an exploit to troll the professional team lobbies. I've also had players troll my lobbies while trying to play matchmaking on stream despite it being private, going back years and years. This has been known for a long time. I don't know the answer, but I'm wondering if this prevents that exploit. Like, if you get into a lobby once when it's created public, does that allow you to rejoin even after it's been made private? Let me know in the comments if you understand this. I'm genuinely curious. The next update is really only important to a small handful of people, myself included, so I'm gonna talk about it. Added SV Reliable Avatar Data 2 to game server settings. What this allows me to do is set the Owlet avatar manually instead of requiring the Owlet to change their avatar when I need to record footage. I know, riveting. I'm sure you're all ever so entertained, but our Owlet has been getting a bit impatient about having to change their My Little Pony avatar back and forth when I need to record. There are also some map changes, which I always promise to cover in subsequent videos, but never do. This time, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm TheWarOwl, and I still have no closer. Too long didn't watch Vanguard missions or overtrained is out. New Kazin smokes improved tagging update. M4A1 price slightly increased. Tech 9 nerf. With mechanics intact, AWP scope movement has drastically reduced acceleration. MP9, MP7, Mag 10 have improved accuracy. Trade-up contracts now work with StatTrak. And the maps have been slightly improved once again, and a number of my older videos have once again been rendered obsolete. Leet.